down the drain. On the 85th anniversary of the repeal of Prohibition, rediscovered footage shows agents busting open barrels of illegal alcohol with axes during a distillery raid. All the way from Congress down to the streets of cities nationwide, America's governing bodies in the 1920s made it their mission to eliminate alcohol. With the passing of the 18th Amendment to the Constitution in 1920, the sale, production and transport of alcohol was made illegal. Consuming or possessing alcohol privately, however, was not, a loophole that inspired the creation of organized crime rings and underground clubs nationwide. 85 years ago today, drinkers nationwide rejoiced. After 13 years, the Blaine Act was passed, which was the first step in dismantling the Prohibition-era restrictions. On its anniversary, new footage showing the severity of anti-alcohol sentiments has been revealed, showing U.S. federal agents raiding an illegal distillery and destroying everything in sight. When Prohibition first took effect in 1920, a cohort of 1,500 federal agents were assigned to the seizure and destruction of any liquor or alcohol. As it turned out, this wasn't nearly enough to combat the overwhelming underground activity working against them. Additionally, the agents were not paid very well for their services at the time, which made them easily influenced by bribes from gangsters and bootleggers. The era coincided with a meteoric rise in organized crime, and kingpins like Lucky Luciano and Al Capone ruled the streets, making millions off their speakeasy clubs and smuggled liquor. Author and historian Bill Bryson said of the era, "There'd never been a more advantageous time to be a criminal in America than during the 13 years of Prohibition." At a stroke, the American government closed down the fifth largest industry in the United States, alcohol production, and just handed it to criminals, a pretty remarkable thing to do. Economically, Prohibition wasn't the best idea for the United States. It caused a tremendous loss of $11 billion in tax revenue, and cost $300 million to enforce, and left room for all that money to be made by criminals. Prohibition began to fall apart when President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Blaine Act, which officially permitted the sale of beer and light wines. However, at the time of its passing, few states were still complying with the amendment's restrictions. As Prohibition went on longer and longer, the public support, which had been broadly in favor of the legislation when it was introduced following the First World War, slowly began to turn on the idea. Some states, such as Maryland, stringently fought the legislation, refusing to implement it, while others began to abandon the law as time went on. By the time Prohibition was repealed in the midst of the Great Depression in 1933, very few states and major cities were still implementing the 13th Amendment. In fact, the Great Depression was a major factor in the ultimate decision to repeal Prohibition, because the U.S. government realized the amount of money taxing alcohol could make for the nation in its time of need.